Poverty in Elizabethan England. Okay, so in terms of this one, anything that I say on here is things that you could talk about in terms of you got a question about poverty. It's going to be something either about the causes of it or what they do with the people who live in poverty and what the poor laws are. It could be something to that effect. So, to be quite honest, the life of the poor in Elizabethan times was not very nice at all. In the Great Chain of Being, they were at the bottom of the human section, just above the animals, so that shows you exactly what they thought of them. And they were known as paupers, and life was very hard for them, very, very hard. They totally relied on charity, and there was a big divide between rich and poor. The rich got richer, and the poor got poorer. That's exactly the same as what happened during the Industrial Revolution when we talked about that in the Power and the People module. They would have to beg or go to a local church for help, and basically they didn't have as many of those left now because of what had happened with the dissolution of the monasteries during Henry VIII's reign. So what were the causes of poverty then? Henry VII, so that's Elizabeth I's grandfather, limited the nobles' right to have their own army. So many soldiers were without work. So there was a lot of unemployment because a lot of people would have been soldiers, but now they couldn't be because the nobles weren't allowed their own army just in case they rose up against Henry VII. And Henry VIII, so the father of Elizabeth I, closed monasteries during the English Reformation. And that meant that was something that meant the monks and nuns didn't have anywhere to live and they became unemployed. And also those places had helped to educate the poor people. It looked after the sick. It gave them alms. So that means it gave them money like charity and food and things. So what I'm trying to say to you is it's not all Elizabeth's fault that people were poor in Elizabethan England. Things that happened a lot earlier that had meant there tended to be poor people. So, to pay for wars, Henry VIII had debased coins. So he mixed in less valuable metals to try and make the gold and silver go further. But because of that, the foreign traders wanted more coins, so that was a problem for him. So it damaged trade, like the cloth trade was damaged and collapsed completely. So in terms of that, another reason why people became poor was because trades collapsed because he was debasing the coins, so that was a major problem. Also, something that was not in anybody's control was what the weather was like. And there was terrible harvests in 1594 and 1598, which obviously was a major problem for Elizabeth I because people started to starve and there wasn't as many people to be able to collect the crops in. Enclosure also meant unemployment rose and more people became poor because people realised that actually if lands were enclosed then there'd be less lands to actually farm and then there'd be a lot more sheep farming. Well, that's okay, but you need less people to look after the sheep than collect the crops in, so that meant that unemployment rose dramatically. And because of this, because of the enclosure, people moved to towns to try and find jobs. Well, what a disaster that was, because when they got to the towns, they became overpopulated, so there was a lot of places that had far too many people living there, so there was nowhere for them to live. And the sad thing about this is the landlords started to rack rent. So what they did is they pushed the prices up for people to rent. And then obviously that was a complete and utter disaster, purely because what happened was they couldn't afford the places to live. So that meant that more and more poor appeared on the streets of the cities. And the population just increased in general. So in London, it went from 60,000 in 1500 to over 200,000 in 1600. So that showed how much that had risen. And as well, in terms of the country, it went from 2.8 million at the start of her reign to 4 million by the end of her reign. So all these people needed to be able to be fed and clothed, but obviously they couldn't be. And the birth rate obviously was continuing to go up, and the death rate was going down slightly because there were slightly better medicines being found and things. So there was a big problem in terms of overpopulation, which caused a huge problem in poverty in Elizabethan England.